Hey guys, today we're driving the 2022 Jeep Grand Cherokee Overland 4xe. Starting price on this is $65,000. As tested, we have about $10,000 in options, luxury groups, tech packages, an off-road package, and the nice Macintosh sound system. We'll test that out at the end of the video. Let's walk you around this Grand Cherokee 4xe today. We'll show you what it looks like inside and out. We'll talk about what it's been like to live with this week, and we'll take it for a drive. So this is a plug-in hybrid. That's what the 4xe means. It goes about 25 miles on a full charge. This has a 14 kilowatt hour battery pack and about 134 horsepower electric motor. That combines with a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder to make 375 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque, which is actually more than the V8 Grand Cherokee, which is pretty exciting. So earlier this year, we drove the Wrangler 4xe, and that was a pretty neat option. It was just a little bit unrefined. I think this Grand Cherokee improves upon that formula quite a bit. We'll talk about the driving experience a little bit later, but in my opinion, this is kind of the ideal SUV package. It's very off-road capable, it's very spacious, it's pretty comfortable and luxurious. This has air suspension, so you can really change the ride height quite a bit from just slamming it all the way down to the ground in axis mode and really lift it up in off-road 2 mode. We'll actually show you that once we get in the car in a minute. First though, let's take a look out back. We'll show you what the back seats look like. We have a Nappa leather interior here. Pretty nice looking back seat area, plenty of leg room. We've got this beautiful panoramic sunroof up top. Sunshades. 2 seat back pockets to store things. Rear climate control with heated seats, a couple USB Type A and C ports. Here's your armrest and cup holders. And overall, a pretty nice looking, functional and attractive interior. A lot of gloss black, unfortunately. It's already getting dusty and pretty scratched up. That's just something you're gonna have to deal with and maintain as best as you can. It kind of is what it is. Let's open up the rear tailgate. Power operated. Plenty of room in here to put your things. There's even a spare tire in the back, full size. Look at that, because this is a 4-wheel drive vehicle. You've got a 12-volt DC outlet, a couple places to hang grocery bags. Very practical SUV. You can lower the rear tailgate here with this button, or there's a little grab handle at the top. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention in the back seats is, I'll show you what these look like folded down. They fold pretty flat, and you can also adjust the backrest angle, which is very neat. Here's what the charge port looks like. Very straightforward. Just open it up and plug it in. On 240 volt, in your garage, for example, you can charge this from 0 to full in about 2 hours, maybe a little bit less. Pretty nice looking SUV. You can see the bright blue recovery points there, denoting this as the 4xe package. Trail rated 4x4 stickers. Oh, you know what? Let's actually raise this up in full off-road height and show you what that looks like. You get a ton of ground clearance from this air suspension. Really nice approach angles. Breakover angle is hindered just a little bit by the battery pack, but everything is heavily armored. Nice flat bottom. And lifted up to its max height, it's impressively tall. Look at that. Talk about versatility. All right, now let's hop in and talk about this interior a little bit. So we have a bunch of different drive modes: auto, sport, which will kick on the engine, snow, sand, mud, and rock, and those will put you into off-road modes. There's also a 4-low button right down there, and hill descent control. Behind these doors, you get wireless phone charging, a bunch of USB ports, an HDMI cable for the passenger. The passenger has his or her own screen, by the way. You can watch movies here, control some vehicle functions, stuff like that. Use wireless headphones, pretty neat. Down here we get our cup holders and a couple different options for our center console. all lined inside with velvet, which is pretty cool. Lots of physical buttons for our climate control. Heated, ventilated seats. You can change the airflow direction, volume, and tune scroll knobs. Wireless CarPlay this week has worked great in this Grand Cherokee. No issues with this Uconnect system. This seems to be pretty well organized too. I like everything that Jeep has done here. You even get some quick access buttons for the surround or forward-facing cameras if you so choose. Yeah, we'll test out this Macintosh sound system too a little bit later. A couple complaints though with this interior. Buttons, switchgear, especially on the steering wheel, just feel incredibly cheap. Feels like someone may have spilled something on this button here. Everything seems to kind of flex and crinkle under your finger's weight. And I'm a little bit perplexed as to the design of this fully digital gauge cluster. We have a couple different fonts, we have colors that definitely don't match, and just a very unattractive design. Luckily, it shows you a ton of different information. Some of it is a bit redundant, but overall I found it to be really useful to look at this week, just not very pleasing to the eye. If you're going to make a digital gauge cluster, at least design it to be attractive, like maybe you've done with your infotainment system. I feel like completely different people designed these two screens here. We have a bunch of different informational pages here. We can see our off-road modes, how high the car is lifted up, vehicle dynamics, pitch and roll angles, screens for our music, settings, main menu. It says night vision too. That's pretty trippy, especially in the dark. Makes it a little bit easier to see animals and things at night. And then there's this view button here where you can press and see a bunch of different menus all at once, which is pretty useful. So I will say, from an informational standpoint, this digital gauge cluster is pretty useful. There's even an option here to see how much you've driven on battery power versus gasoline power. You can see here in trip A, I've driven a total of 142.3 miles. 84 of those miles have been on battery power, 58 have been on gasoline, for an average of 29.8 MPGe. Pretty good, not bad. Trip A is a little bit better, but that's okay. We'll worry about that later. So otherwise, we've got a lot of physical buttons, 2 memory seat settings, fold the mirrors in if you want, auto up-down windows on all 4 corners. Oh, and to the left here, we have our 3 drive modes, or our 3 battery modes. There's hybrid mode, which is usually what the car defaults to, unless if you've set it to be in electric mode previously. Electric mode, which saves fuel for later use. You only have 134 horsepower from the electric motor in EV mode. So you can get around town reasonably well, but it's not hugely powerful. But it's enough to get up to speed and kind of cruise around. And then there's this e-save button, which just saves the battery for later use. The engine kicks on. You can actually go into the settings and customize how much you want that to charge the battery, whether it's to full or to a certain percentage. That's kind of a nice feature. We'll start off in hybrid mode today, but first let's show you under the hood and walk you around this Grand Cherokee just a little bit more. I want to also slam this into access mode and show you what that looks like, completely lowered on its air suspension. I think it looks pretty wicked. This definitely makes getting in and out of the SUV a lot easier, and loading things up in the trunk helps with that too. 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. I believe this has around 270 horsepower on its own. Left to its own devices, it gets about 23 miles to the gallon. And overall, with plug-in hybrid power, this should average about 56 MPGe. So kind of some confusing fuel economy numbers. Ultimately, all this adds up to is that it depends how you drive this Jeep Grand Cherokee and how far it's driven on a daily basis. If your commute is 10 to 15 miles, you could feasibly use very little, if barely any, gasoline in this Grand Cherokee 4xe. If you've got a trailer hitch hidden behind this panel, very easy to open up. It should tow about 6,000 pounds. Oh, and it looks like we've also got an automatically opening tailgate if you stand back there long enough. All right, let's hop inside. We'll take this Grand Cherokee 4xe for a drive and talk about what it's like on the road. We'll start off in auto mode and hybrid. Really nice visibility in this Grand Cherokee too. We also get a fully digital rear view mirror. Steering is light at low speeds. Brake pedal feels pretty normal too, driving around. So this is electric power here from the battery. This also has a decent amount of regenerative braking. There's a button where you can turn that on and off right there. Max regen. You can't quite one pedal drive this Grand Cherokee 4xe, but you can use it to slow down quite a bit in traffic. So we've got a power meter pulled up here. The green is going to be our battery electric motor energy. The blue is going to be when the gasoline engine kicks in. So you kind of get an idea for what is powering the vehicle at any particular moment. When you have a reasonably full charge in the battery and you set it to hybrid mode, it'll mostly just use up that battery until the gasoline engine kicks on. If you're just cruising around in this thing, the gasoline engine will idle a little bit when you first start it up, just kind of get things up to temperature, and it'll occasionally turn on if you give it a little bit more throttle here and there. But for the most part, you're going to be mostly in EV mode. So, still in EV mode. Let's show you that power transition here. A little bit of throttle, gas engine comes on. At light throttle applications, the transition is actually very seamless. It's when you're going from 0 to full throttle is when there's about a 2-second delay between actually getting some power out of the powertrain and your right foot going flat out. We'll show you what that looks like here. So accelerating, we're in EV mode. I want to get up to speed really quickly here. Foot's to the floor, and now we accelerate. Takes everything just a minute to come on. Also, let's go into sport mode. The stability control system is a little bit intrusive in this Grand Cherokee 4xe, but it does keep you safe. Plenty of power from this powertrain. 375 horsepower, 470 pound-feet of torque. This is no slowpoke. Cruise control. We have a couple different options. We can have active driving assist, which will steer for us. You just have to kind of keep your hand on the wheel, keep a little bit of constant torque going at all times. It won't negotiate turns too well, but it'll keep you on the straight sections of highway pretty well centered between the lines. If you want to disable that, you kind of have to reset your whole cruise control system and just redo it with adaptive cruise. You can skip 5-mile-an-hour increments. This is a pretty nice system. It's worked pretty well this week. It maintains a pretty close following distance as well. My only complaint with the cruise control has been that when you set your speed, you get just the tiniest little display of what you've set that speed to right down here, and it's kind of hard to see, especially with all the other information going on in this fully digital display. The button layout though on the steering wheel, everything is nicely done, very easy to control, no issues there. Alright, let's switch into fully electric mode. This saves fuel for later use. Very nice. There's a little display that tells you what each mode is for. I do wish these buttons over here to the left for hybrid, electric, and e-save were located somewhere a little bit better. It's kind of tedious to have to look over and see what I'm pressing, take my eyes off the road. If they were up here or in a more easily accessed spot, I would prefer that, because I do find myself switching between hybrid and electric pretty often, depending on whether I'm on the highway or whether I'm on kind of city driving, backstreet scenarios. All right, so this is full acceleration from the electric motor. It's a reasonable amount of acceleration. This is full regen braking off throttle. I'll show you what it's like merging onto the highway with just the electric motor power. Full power here, just kind of creeping up to speed. If I want some more acceleration, all I have to do is floor it, electric mode will disable, and then the engine will kick on and give me full power. When you do go full throttle in electric mode, it will put you into hybrid driving mode automatically, and then you'll have to switch back into electric driving mode if you want it. I found that you can comfortably cruise on the highway in EV mode. You can't really make passes too well, but if you're just cruising 65, 70 miles an hour on the highway, EV mode is plenty of power to keep you going. It will eat through your battery pretty quickly though. All right, back into hybrid, maybe into sport. Let's use these paddle shifters. We have a little bit of a gauge display here with what gear we're in. Brake pedal feels pretty normal. A little bit of body roll initially, but overall this handles pretty well. For an SUV at least. I've got to say, I have really enjoyed the plug-in hybrid powertrain with this Grand Cherokee 4xe this week. Again, I've driven about 150 miles, and the fuel gauge has barely moved from full, which is really impressive. I think this is kind of the ideal powertrain for 2022 for most people's use with an SUV. Making this a fully electric vehicle is going to add a lot of weight, it's going to add a lot of cost, and kind of having the best of both worlds, I think, works really well for a vehicle like this. You can use it as mostly an electric vehicle for probably 50 to 90% of your driving, depending on where you go, what you do. You can save the battery for later. I will say off-roading in this Grand Cherokee in full electric mode is pretty cool. There are definitely a few things about this car that feel a little bit cheap and unrefined. It would be nice to get a little bit better response from the hybrid powertrain, but overall it makes pretty seamless transitions between electric and gasoline power. It's very normal to drive around. It's quiet, it's luxurious, has a great sound system. Let's test that here actually. This Macintosh sounds really good. It's just a little bit too bass heavy in my opinion. I've actually gone in and turned the bass all the way down, and it's still a little bit too deep. But let's see if we give you guys a taste of that right now. Behind the steering wheel, we have controls for volume and track selection, just like every other Stellantis product. This Macintosh audio is good. It's not as impressive as I thought it would be, given its name. There's a little bit too much bass. It's a little bit too bright. You can kind of customize that to how you like. It's pretty good though for a vehicle at this price point. For 65 grand, I'd be very happy with this in-car audio, and it is just cool to see that Macintosh logo up there. All right, guys, so final thoughts on the Grand Cherokee 4xe. Overall, I've really liked this SUV this week. This is kind of does it all. It's off-road capable, it's a good daily driver, it's comfortable, it's luxurious, it rides well, and the plug-in hybrid powertrain is just a really nice addition to the Grand Cherokee, and a pretty nice selling point too. Compared to the Jeep Wrangler 4xe, it's a much more refined package, a little bit you know, better powertrain development, I think, too. And of course, it's much better to drive on road. Doesn't have all of the kind of wallowiness of a Wrangler, but we still have a very capable chassis here that is trail rated. So I think it can kind of do everything for you. If you're looking for just a nice daily driver or a family vehicle that is a plug-in hybrid, you know, it's a little bit more tedious to use than a full EV because you are plugging it in every time you bring it back into your driveway or garage. Whereas with a full EV, you're only maybe going to be plugging it in every other day or overnight, or maybe even once a week, depending on how much you drive. So they're definitely, it's a more involved ownership experience from that perspective. All right, guys. Well, overall, pretty good impressions from this Grand Cherokee 4xe. I think it's a pretty nice buy, and I'm glad they've brought it out as a plug-in hybrid. This, to me, makes the most sense out of any Grand Cherokee in the lineup, especially with the way fuel prices are today. So anyway, guys, that'll be it for this one. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. We'll see you in the next video.